welcome to another up close video. So today's video is looking at some floating frame dies from Tonic. There are 4 different designs. The outside portion of each of them is identical, so you're kind of picking which inside design you like the best, or if you have all of them, you know, then you can cut multiple outsides. You don't have to keep using the same outside, which is great. So the 4 different designs are roses, vines, butterflies and florals. Their names might change, but you know, they're kind of descriptive, those names anyway. And so for each of the 4 designs you get this outside piece which cuts you a rectangle, but on both ends of the rectangle you have this double score line about 1 centimetre in from the end, or just over 1 centimetre actually, because the 12mm red liner tape that Tonic do fits absolutely perfectly on these tabs. But this double score line is so you can, well, there's multiple ways that you can use these dies, and I'll show you some of the ways that I've done, but I think the concept of these is that you would cut this from acetate or card actually, and use the aperture die for the centre, but you cut it from whatever you're cutting it from, and you fold these 2 ends over, and then you can bow the cardstock so that it creates a dome on your card like this. And depending on the length of the piece of card you put behind this piece gives you a different amount of bowedness to the front of your card. So this was cutting the back panel to, I think it was about 13.5 centimetres, but whereas I think this one was only about 14 centimetres, so the bowing is less on the card, but that's what this die is meant to do. And having this double score line means that it really bends nicely around and gives you that domed effect, rather than it the piece of card that you're sticking it to is kind of gets stuck if there's just 1 score line there. But having the 2 score lines gives that tiny little bit of depth and really helps this to work a lot better. So that's why there is a double score line. But there's also other ways of using the outside piece. You can also use this to create a little skinny box card that's about 1 centimetre thick, which sort of does that parallelogram-y thing where it slides off to the side and folds flat like this. So it goes like this and folds flat, but you have that sort of 1 centimetre, but it folds flat for an envelope. So those are kind of like the different things that you can do with this die. So it's basically made to create that domed effect, so it gives the effect of the illusion that the frame is floating in midair. But for each of the 4 different die sets, as well as getting this piece that you can create those kinds of cards with, you don't have to create those kinds of cards. This middle section is really gorgeous, and it's split into a frame and a central piece with an outside cutting edge for that central piece. So you can cut this piece as a frame, you can cut this smaller central piece as a little topper for something, you can cut it multiple times to create a background, you can snip parts of the design out, you can do loads of different bits and pieces with these designs, and they will fit really nicely on my favourite kind of size of card, which is like an A2 kind of size. So this actual die doesn't have an outside cutting edge because obviously you are it's designed to be used with this one, which is an outside cutting edge. But this piece would cut into a rectangle that is 4¼ by 5½. So if you love your A2 cards, this will fit absolutely perfectly into an A2 piece of cardstock. Just, you know, it'll just cut straight into it and give you that gorgeous frame design, because all of the frame elements have a cutting edge on this interior edge, so that just cuts the frame as it is. However, if you wanted, say for example, you cut one of these, but you wanted this design to be on your bowed piece, but you want there to be a solid backing behind the frame rather than being able to see through it, you would cut this from cardstock, and then you would use this interior die to line it up the right way, obviously, to cut the centre out of the solid cardstock you know, that's this one. So you would then have a piece that has that aperture in the centre, and then you could then cut this one separately out of another rectangle of card and stick it over the top, and you would then have the solid behind this intricate piece as well. Or what I've done on one of my cards is use this to create an aperture, kind of a similar idea, putting it inside a rectangle, and then having the frame surrounding it, but then using this piece over the top to create a shaker behind it, and then you've got the intricate detail on the front of the shaker, but there's shaker elements in this sort of aperture area. So you can do that with them as well. And obviously you can use these two together to cut this interior portion out, which you can then layer inside here to create a full background. You can have it also floating on the front dome of the frame, or you can sit it behind the frame so that the actual frame is domed in the front and this piece is sitting on the back of the card as well. I'll try and explain all of those bits more as I show you my samples as well, but let's just show you the designs up close. So I think these two on this magnetic sheet are my two favourite ones. So this one is the viney sort of one. I really love these leaves that are in the centre, and one of my cards have actually cut them out and used them as well, and you also get this gorgeous viney outside edge, which has some really perfect places for nouveau drops or gems. A lot of the design has this perfect circles in them, and they kind of give you sort of berries in the design, and they're perfect for nouveau drops and gems and stuff too. Then we have this one, which is roses. It has a sort of thorny kind of frame with a few like stalks or with leaves on the end of it, and then you have two roses opposite each other, and they're slightly different as well, so you can snip these out and use them on cards, and you have two slightly different versions. And the interior section of this one also has another rose in it, and this is actually the one I used for that shaker card that I was trying to explain the concept of. But a really gorgeous design, this one, and all of them work really nicely just as they are, because they have these extra details cut into them to give like the detail on the leaves and stuff. So you can just cut them out of coloured card or speciality card, or you can shadow them as well, so you get like a drop shadow of two different colours. But you can also watercolour them, use your alcohol pens on them, and really pick out the detail within the design as well. So you can really colour in the rose. You can even paper piece back in the pieces if you want to. One of my cards I've paper pieced these two little leaves in the centre. So there's loads of different things that you can do with them to make them look different and maybe more advanced and like you spent longer on a card. And then these two are the butterflies, which is a really gorgeous butterfly frame. I think I've only used this on one of the cards, but this butterfly down here is really nice to cut out and use on other cards as well, so I have done that in a few cases. But it's full of butterflies, this frame, and it's sort of more of a landscape orientation. I think all of the others you could use landscape or portrait, but the butterfly you kind of want to use in landscape mode because of the way the butterflies are positioned. And you've kind of got this sort of mothy butterfly up in this corner as well, which would also be really easy to snip out of the design. And then in the centre of the design you have those two butterflies again within that design too. And obviously more viney bits linking them all together, and small little butterflies as well. And on all of them you get the outside edge, that verso die which fits perfectly in an A2 piece of card, the interior cutting edge, and then that interior patterned piece which is also a verso die that works with that cutting edge. And then finally is the sort of more floral one. That has it's a really lovely frame, this one as well, and it's asymmetrical, so it's not the same cluster repeated on this one, like, you know, with the rose they're kind of like opposite each other. This is completely different flowers all the way around, so it gives a really nice organic sort of look, and all sorts of different flowers as well. And if you didn't have many flower dies, you could also snip into this and get your own little flowers out of it to use as embellishments as well. And again you have that gorgeous central section, which all the central sections you can just use them by themselves as well. You don't have to use it outside with them. And a couple of the cards I've done, I focused on the interior sections as well, just to show you some different ways of how to use them. So those are the 4 designs, and then I've got 7 cards to show you. how I have used them. So there are, let's show you these three first. There are three main ways of actually using, well, that I've found, that actually using that domed portion that makes the floating frame kind of effect. I think this one is my favourite actually. This is cutting two of them. One of them you keep just a completely plain die cut from like white card or coloured card, and the other one you cut that intricate panel into it, and then you just fold the edges down and stick them together to create this box effect. And I actually stuck acetate behind the intricate one on this just to make it stronger, and then I snipped out a couple of those butterflies and added them on little strips of acetate so they're floating inside. So it's kind of like a shadow box sort of idea, but the little butterflies are floating inside, but it folds perfectly flat to go in a card as well, to go in an envelope. And if this size is perfect for an A2 card, an A2 card is a teeny bit shorter than like a UK A6 card. So when you fold it like this, it makes it a tiny bit longer, which means then that's going to fit absolutely perfectly in an A6 envelope. So if you're doing any cards like this, just keeping them using these outside rectangles and they slide off to the side, that fits perfectly in an A6 envelope. I mean, the other ones, this one where it's not bowed too much should fit in an A6 envelope as well. This one you're probably going to want to put in some kind of box or hand deliver it because it's a really deep dome on it. But so this is just using the two pieces literally like as they are, and sticking the tabs together to create this kind of a look. And I do really like how this one turned out. This was the main one I used the butterflies on, just having an inky background behind, and literally just cutting it out of white, and then using some of the Nouveau crystal gems to embellish the bodies of the butterflies, and just a simple Imagine sentiment, which I thought was really lovely, because this could kind of be like a bit of home decor. It doesn't have to just be a card. And you could put this on a card blank if you wanted to as well. It does stand up just by itself, and you could just write on the back of it to whoever it's to, or you could stick an extra like little folded piece of card on the back just to write on as well. So that's that one. And then these two are the domed ones that I've done. One is actually this way, portrait, and one is landscape, and I decided to change the amount that they domed out. And you really don't have to change the dimension of the back piece of card much to create this domed effect. So as I said earlier, the length of this piece was about 13.5, I think, centimetres. Let me just try and check that. Oh no, it's 13. It's 13. The length of that one's 13, and so the length of this one must be 13.5 centimetres. And that just creates a difference. So just like varying it by 5mm really creates a difference in that domed effect. So just having that 5mm less really like doubles the amount that the dome comes out. And these two I have done with acetate. So you can see there the dome, or the main piece, is from acetate, and then I have just stuck the die cut panels onto it. But if you, like I was trying to explain before, if you wanted this to be solid behind here so that you couldn't see through these top portions, like where there's holes in the design, you would cut this domed piece from a solid colour of card, and you would use that aperture die to cut the centre out, so that obviously you could still see through the centre of the piece, but the frame would have a solid backing behind it. But yeah, loads of different ways of using these. And if you want to put any Nouveau drops, like I've used some stone drops here, and some normal glossy Nouveau drops as well. If you want to do anything like that, you kind of want to let that dry whilst it's still flat before you dome it as well. And the background of this card, I actually used loads of different drops together. I think there was a couple of different gloss drops, a couple of different glitter drops, a stone drop and a vintage drop as well, and I just splodged loads of them onto a piece of like A6 kind of sized card, took another piece exactly the same, squished them together, like rubbed them together a little bit, pulled them apart, and I got this really wicked looking background. Almost looks like it's been acrylic poured, and then whilst it was all still wet, I sprinkled in some Mermaid Parade stars in there as well, so they just stuck to all the wet areas. So that's how I did the background. And this one's frame, I actually did the drop shadow as well. So it's not just the blue, it's got a drop shadow of white just to kind of make it really evident that it's standing out from the background as well. So this one is a landscape card, and I did it a top folding landscape card, so it kind of supports the weight of this. If I'd done it this way, it's not gonna, well, it does when it's really wide open, but the kind of normal width you would stand it on a mantelpiece, it doesn't really stay up. So I suggest, if you can, trying to do a top folding card for these kind of cards. And then this one I've done as a portrait one, and used one of the, I think they were called duo sentiments or sentiment duos from Tonic, where you had a vertical and horizontal sentiment in the same set. Because I thought that sorry fitted perfectly down the front of this card. And for this one I have just done, the outside frame is just one die cut, and then I used the leftovers from the inside to cut the interior piece as well. And then I lined this frame up with the piece of card that's on the backing and stuck that frame in it before I stuck this frame to the acetate, so that I could get the perfect placement in the centre for that piece in there as well. And the background for that is just a simple shimmer powder background, and I think I threw in a bit of Aquaflow as well, and then I put some cling film on it and let it dry, so it's kind of got that crinkly effect in it. I don't know if you can really see it. And to finish this one off, I added some more little gems to all those little berry kind of places that I pointed out earlier. And I've also snipped out a butterfly and cut it in the same two colours that I've shadowed the sentiment with. And the butterfly is from the butterfly floating frame as well. And again, I've now changed the orientation of the dome, like the domed piece. So you want to, again, make sure it's a top folding card, because if this is a side folding, okay, it does stand for a side folding card actually, for this one, because the dome isn't too big. So if you've got a smaller domed area, it does still stand really. So yeah, yeah. And so this one's background piece was 13.5 centimeters long, so it's 10.5 wide, my background piece, and 13.5 centimeters long gives that kind of a bow to it. And then 10.5 wide and 13 centimeters long gives that kind of a bow to it. And obviously you don't have to have the bow at all. You could maybe use that tab system but cut the card to exactly the same length as this piece without it being bowed, and just use 3D foam to sort of make it like a tiny little bit raised from it to give that sort of floating frame look. Or you don't have to even use the domed frame at all. You could just stick the frame onto your card as well. So that is like how you use the outside pieces in a few different ways. Then I did this one, which is the shaker card, and that's got those fiery phoenix little circle confetti in there. And for this one I have just I've used that interior aperture piece to give this a solid backing, so that I could colour the flowers. So I've used the Nuvo alcohol pens to colour in the two flowers, and I also came back in with some Nuvo glitter markers as well to give it a sparkly finish too. And I've just coloured in the green leaves and the two roses, and I just left the rest of it white because I'd cut it from white card, and I think it looks really nice like that. And then for the shaker I have left the die cut white and then used red card behind it and then red confetti as well. So it kind of makes that rose still stand out nicely. And then the sentiments, I've just shadowed them and added the red card that I've been using throughout the rest of the card as well to make that coordinate. And if you think the edges of your panels look a little bit messy, the two largest dies from the Tonic A2 mixed edged rectangle die set work absolutely perfectly to create a scalloped frame to fit around this piece as well. So that's really nice that they work perfectly together with existing Tonic dies too. So that's making it into a shaker card. Then this one, look how different they are. That is the same die set that I used, but they look so different. So that's using it as a whole, and this one is cutting out the roses from it. And I also used a You're the Best sentiment from the Floral frames die sets, and I just used an oxide ink pad, dragged it in the background, did a bit of splattering, I've used fresh snowfall glitter accents around the edge and layered it onto a piece of scrunched up vellum to create a really different kind of looking card. I did a bit of stenciling on the oxides in the background as well with some surf blue Nuvo embellishment mousse, and I also used embellishment mousse on the roses as well. But a really different look to using the same die set as well, which I really like. There's so much versatility in these. Then these two are both very similar ideas. This one is using the centre section of the floral one, and I think I cut it 4 to 5 times, and you get this cool little pattern between where they join. It's like a little wiggly cloudy kind of pattern, because obviously they don't butt right up against each other, but depending how far away or how close they end up being, you either get this sort of twisted ribbon kind of a look where they've joined, or you get this sort of puffy cloud kind of a look. But I think when you're looking at that, you don't really notice, or you don't really think that that was one small die that's been cut multiple times. It kind of looks like it's a complete background pattern, which I really like. So the main concept for this card was cutting that pattern into the white card. Then I put double-sided adhesive behind the white die cut and filled it full of, is it called Bluebell? Yes, Bluebell glitter from the Blue Blossom colour trend. I just completely filled that in with that to give the glittery look, and I used a couple of the Nuvo drops that came out in the Blue Blossom trend. These are the jewel ones, so they're kind of picking up the glitter underneath them, these ones, and then these are just one of the gloss ones, and I've also used a bit of gloss white too. And then to finish this one, to give it a neater edge, I've used the dot and stitch squares from Tonic to create a thin little frame, and then I've ripped a piece of vellum to go across the centre and used one of the Memory Book Essentials die sets. This one had the Never Stop Dreaming in it, and I've just done a shadowed sentiment for that one. And then this one is a very similar concept, but making a smaller card and only cutting that interior piece twice. So this is from the Vines one, and I just cut it twice. I did a similar concept, however, before putting any glitter on, I paper pieced back in these leaves, and then I sprinkled on some green star confetti. I think it's olive green stars, and then I filled the rest in with prickly pear glitter, and I just did a sentiment strip across the centre. And these two little leaves, I had to cut this middle portion again, obviously, to get the green pieces to paper piece into these leaf designs. So I had this cut out in green card, so I snipped out the leaves, stuck them onto white card, cut round them again, and you've just got a couple of little leaf embellishments to go on there too. So simple, that card, and even though it has a weird wiggly edge to it that kind of doesn't really make sense when you're just using it on a normal card, I think it looks really nice. I don't think you'd really think you've used a die in the wrong way or anything to create this card. I think it just looks quite funky with this sort of random aperture really around the edge of it. So that was all my cards that I've created using the floating frame die sets from Tonic. There are 4 different designs within these die sets, and each of them have the same outside portion, so you could just pick one of them if you wanted to experiment with them. Or if you have dies similar to this, you could even try and experiment and see if you could create these kind of dome effects with those dies that you already have as well, because they're quite easy to do, but having these dies just makes it super simple. You don't have to think about it at all. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of inspiration, and I will see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye!